started as a murmur under Italy's postcard-perfect coastline, more than 54,000 tiny earthquakes flickering beneath the Campi Flegrei supervolcano. When scientists pushed that data through an AI model, the pattern snapped into focus. A vast ring-shaped fracture encircling the ancient port city of Pozzuoli and curving out beneath the bay. This is not a normal swarm. It is a hidden fault that matches the caldera's slow inflation and traces where the ground is quietly tearing. That same ground is now rising by millimeters each month, loading stress that could unleash magnitude 5 quakes with almost no warning. Is this invisible ring just mapping old scars, or setting up the first domino in a chain of future earthquakes and a possible eruption? Yet beneath their feet, the ground is doing something ominous. The entire city sits inside the Campi Flegrei caldera, a 7-mile-wide volcanic depression just west of Naples. This is one of the most densely populated volcanic regions on Earth. Since April 2025, satellites and GPS stations have measured the caldera rising by about 15 millimeters. Each month, an unsettling process called bradyseism that has been going on in pulses for decades. The latest uplift has coincided with an extraordinary discovery. An AI system trained on millions of seismic signals analyzed more than 54,000 tiny earthquakes that have occurred beneath the caldera since 2022. These quakes were so small that traditional methods barely registered them. But when the AI plotted their locations, a thin, crisp, ring-shaped fracture appeared. This ring fault encircles the zone of uplift and extends offshore, linking recent shaking to the caldera's architecture. At the northern edge of the ring, beneath the seaside town of Pozzuoli, the catalog shows 2 long faults converging. For the first time, scientists have a precise outline of stress zones that were previously invisible. Locals have felt the difference. Over the past year, a swarm of small tremors rattled dishes and cracked plaster. Shopkeepers tape their shelves. Parents keep children away from ancient arches. Many remember the 1980s when the ground rose more than a meter and nearly 40,000 people were evacuated. Yet the fear now is not just of another uplift. An earthquake in the magnitude 5 range is not out of the question. All the activity is occurring within 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers of the surface, and there is no evidence of magma moving upward. Instead, pressurized fluids and faults are driving the shaking. Walking through the caldera, you can see other signs of a restless system. Fumaroles hiss sulfurous steam, and the famous Solfatara crater bubbles like a witch's cauldron. The port of Pozzuoli has warped over time. Some docks now sit higher than others, testimony to the seesawing ground. The ancient Roman amphitheater here, once used for gladiatorial games, now hosts concerts, yet engineers regularly inspect its arches for new cracks. Because the ring fault tracks the zone of uplift, any future bursts of shaking may circle this zone like a noose tightening. The scene presents a chilling question. Is this cluster of microquakes and slow uplift just another episode in a restless caldera, or a prelude to something much larger? For seismologists, the discovery of Campi Flegrei's hidden ring fault is more than a curiosity. It's a sign that the caldera's stress field is reorganizing in unexpected ways. 2 long faults converge directly beneath the town of Pozzuoli, and geologists now believe a magnitude 5 earthquake is well within the realm of possibility. A quake of that size in a shallow urban setting could topple centuries-old buildings, rupture gas lines, and trigger landslides on the steep walls of the caldera. The ring fault also tracks the caldera's uplift and extends offshore. That alignment means the zone under tension is literally encircling the area where the ground is rising fastest. In other words, the land is being squeezed in a circular pattern while it swells upward like a pot lid rattling before it blows. There is no sign of magma moving towards the surface, which might seem reassuring, but that absence shifts the hazard from explosive eruption to destructive earthquakes. Pressurized fluids coursing through the faults can lubricate them, making them more likely to slip suddenly. And because the entire system is shallower than 2.5 miles, any slip would send violent shaking straight to the surface. History offers grim reminders of what can happen when seemingly minor signals are ignored. In 1964, Alaska's magnitude 9.2 megathrust quake, the second largest ever recorded, occurred after a long, quiet period and triggered a devastating tsunami that destroyed coastal communities. In Japan, the 2011 Tohoku earthquake unleashed waves that overtopped seawalls and floodgates, disabling backup generators and cooling systems at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. The tsunami resulted in about 19,500 deaths and caused widespread destruction. At Mount Etna, a flank collapse thousands of years ago sent 6 cubic miles of rock into the sea. The resulting tsunami towered up to 130 feet and raced across the Mediterranean. These examples show that rare geological configurations can lead to cascading disasters. Scientists worry that the bradyseism currently raising Pozzuoli by 15 millimeters per month could act as a slow fuse. Each millimeter of uplift adds stress to the ring fault and the converging fractures beneath the city. The AI-generated map now shows exactly where those stresses are accumulating. Imagine the ring as a loaded spring. It may not blow the whole volcano apart, but if it snaps, the shock could travel around the entire caldera, triggering a cascade of slips along intersecting faults. What makes this scenario so chilling is its unpredictability. Traditional monitoring focuses on magma movement, yet Campi Flegrei's current unrest is driven by fluids and fractures. No one knows how much pressure the ring fault can withstand before giving way. And because the caldera sits under a city of more than 500,000 people, any significant earthquake would have immediate human consequences. Even experts are divided. Some argue that the system has cycled through similar uplifts without major events. Others point out that for the first time, the underlying geologic structures responsible for the danger are clearly visible, and that knowledge forces a re-evaluation of risk. To understand why Campi Flegrei's unrest is so worrisome, we have to delve into the mechanics driving it and the technology now exposing those forces. A caldera forms when a giant volcanic eruption empties a magma chamber and the ground above collapses. The resulting depression is often ringed by a circular fracture known as a ring fault, which acts like a hinge as pressure beneath the volcano changes. The ring fault can slip, channeling stress and guiding earthquake locations. Such structures are thought to influence later eruptions and to control where magma or fluids can move. At Campi Flegrei, scientists long suspected a hidden ring fault, but traditional seismic methods couldn't see it clearly. That changed when researchers built an artificial intelligence model to analyze continuous seismic data. Standard seismology relies on phase picking, where analysts look for sudden changes in the wiggly lines of a seismogram. It works well for larger earthquakes but misses many small events. The new AI trained on millions of labeled examples and can detect overlapping signals that human eyes and older algorithms overlook. When this model processed Campi Flegrei's recordings from 2022-2025, it identified 54,000 earthquakes, more than 4 times the 12,000 events cataloged by conventional methods. Plotting these tiny tremors in 3 dimensions revealed a thin, well-marked ring encircling the area where the ground is rising. Remarkably, the ring extends offshore, linking recent shaking to structures beneath the Gulf of Pozzuoli. This alignment brings the caldera's architecture into sharp focus and provides the first precise outline of stress zones. The AI map also uncovered 2 long faults converging directly beneath Pozzuoli. These faults meet just under the town's historic center, where tens of thousands of residents live and work. The location and length of these faults suggests that a magnitude 5 earthquake is not out of the question. Previously, scientists knew Campi Flegrei was hazardous. 16,000 quakes prompted a mass evacuation in the 1980s, but they couldn't pinpoint the structures responsible. Now we're seeing for the first time the geologic structures that are responsible, said Stanford geophysicist William Ellsworth. The clarity of the ring fault surprised Italian researchers who expected scattered seismicity in the south but hadn't seen such a crisp pattern in the north. The new insights dovetail with other monitoring technologies. GPS and INSAR satellites track ground movement to millimeter precision, confirming that Campi Flegrei has been rising by about 15 millimeters per month since April 2025. This uplift, known as bradyseism, is driven by pressure changes in underground fluids. The AI-identified ring fault lines up with the zone of uplift, indicating that as the ground swells, stress is being concentrated along this circular fracture. The entire earthquake swarm is occurring within about 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers below the surface, and there is no sign of magma moving upward. Instead, pressurized water and gas are likely expanding cracks and lubricating faults, increasing the risk of sudden slips. Uplift not only strains the ring fault, it also stresses buildings. Authorities note that a rise of 0.6 inches each month adds measurable stress to foundations and walls. If the ring fault fails, any resulting shaking could travel around the caldera like a shockwave, just as the alignment suggests. Armed with this knowledge, Italian officials are revising their early warning and emergency plans. Italy's Civil Protection Agency divides Campi Flegrei into red and yellow zones based on eruption and ash hazards. The red zone covers areas most likely to be inundated by pyroclastic flows or ash falls. The yellow zone encompasses areas that could receive heavy ash or be cut off by road closures. Evacuation routes and priorities are pre-planned so that when activity escalates, authorities can move people quickly. Residents are urged to know your zone, secure heavy furniture, and follow INGV updates. On a practical level, this means anchoring bookshelves and water heaters, having a go bag ready, and paying attention to official bulletins when microquakes swarm. The ring fault map also informs engineers. By converting scattered seismic dots into clear lines, the new catalog lets scientists estimate the realistic range of shaking each fault could produce. These estimates guide where to reinforce buildings, place shelters, and stage ambulances and road crews. If a swarm begins, officials can monitor whether the ring fault lights up in sync with increased uplift. This near real-time link between pressure and fault activity may one day allow for more timely warnings, even if eruptions cannot be predicted precisely. Perhaps the most profound change is conceptual. For decades, Campi Flegrei's hazard assessments focused on magma rising to the surface. Now scientists see that faults and fluids may pose an equally serious threat. The AI approach doesn't predict when a disaster will happen, but it reveals the pathways where stress is concentrating. By applying similar models to other restless volcanic systems, researchers hope to build a global atlas of hidden faults and stress zones. In a world where populations cluster around dangerous volcanoes, that knowledge could mean the difference between a well-planned evacuation and catastrophe. Imagine the scene when a hidden ring fault finally gives way. A magnitude 5 earthquake, shallow, sudden, and centered beneath a densely packed city, could ripple through narrow streets, toppling centuries-old masonry, snapping gas lines, and shattering glass. On the waterfront, wharves built on reclaimed land might slump into the bay. Hillsides around the Caldera rim could collapse, sending landslides down through neighborhoods. Because the ring fault extends offshore, a segment failing beneath the Gulf of Pozzuoli might trigger a local tsunami, like the waves generated by underwater landslides in the 1964 Alaska earthquake that struck almost immediately and caused most of the event's 122 tsunami-related deaths. Within minutes, walls of water could surge into marinas and low-lying districts, scattering fishing boats and inundating narrow streets where evacuation routes are easily clogged. Past disasters show how cascading failures can magnify the impact. In Japan, the 2011 Tohoku tsunami overwhelmed seawalls and floodgates along much of the coast. The 15-meter wave disabled backup generators and cooling systems at 3 nuclear reactors, leading to the Fukushima Daiichi accident. More than 500 people died. Entire towns were swept away, and hundreds of thousands lost their homes. The tragedy was not simply the earthquake or even the towering wave, but the way infrastructure failed under conditions it was never designed to withstand. In Alaska, the 1964 megathrust quake caused widespread uplift and subsidence, collapsing docks and snapping bridges. The ensuing tsunamis destroyed coastal villages. These events underscore a sobering truth: when natural systems exceed human design limits, consequences cascade across sectors from power grids and transportation to water supply and public health. Campi Flegrei's own history offers a smaller-scale warning. During the Bradysism crisis of the 1980s, repeated uplifts cracked buildings in Pozzuoli and forced the evacuation of about 40,000 residents. Businesses shuttered, tourism plummeted, and entire communities were displaced for months. Many never returned. Today, more than 360,000 people live inside the 7-mile-wide caldera, and roughly 1.5 million reside in the surrounding area. Evacuating so many on narrow roads would be an immense logistical challenge, even with days of warning. A sudden quake gives hours at best, and a landslide-induced tsunami might allow only minutes. Many residents also live in poverty or rely on local fishing and tourism. Displacement would devastate livelihoods, amplifying the human cost. Environmental impacts would extend beyond immediate destruction. Landslides could choke the bay with sediment smothering marine life. Submerged sewage lines might rupture, polluting coastal waters. Fires ignited by gas leaks could sweep through neighborhoods. And even a moderate earthquake could damage critical infrastructure: hospitals, water treatment plants, communication hubs. In 2011, damage at Fukushima included loss of electricity and cooling. A similar disruption in the Campi area could affect Naples' power grid, port operations, and regional transportation. Recognizing these risks, authorities have developed detailed contingency plans. Italy's Civil Protection Agency divides the area into red and yellow emergency zones and has mapped evacuation routes and priority shelters. Officials urge residents to secure heavy furniture, know their zone, and follow seismic updates. Regular drills teach people how to drop cover and hold during shaking, where to evacuate if sirens sound, and how to assist neighbors. Urban planners use the new ring fault map to reinforce buildings and stage ambulances and road crews in safer areas. Thanks to the AI-enhanced seismic catalog, they now know which corridors are most likely to shake intensely and can pre-position resources accordingly. Still, experts caution that no plan can eliminate risk. Emergency services may be overwhelmed and some residents will refuse to evacuate without clear evidence of danger. Could a moderate earthquake at Campi Flegrei trigger a landslide and tsunami like those seen in Alaska? Would seawalls and evacuation routes hold? If waves similar to Tohoku's arrived, might a chain of infrastructure failures cascade as it did in Japan? These questions haunt planners and scientists alike. The ultimate consequence of ignoring nature's warning signs is tragically clear from history. The ring fault and uplift at Campi Flegrei are not just academic curiosities. They are alarm bells. Their sound should spur preparations, reinforcing buildings, educating communities, rehearsing evacuations before disaster strikes. While the discovery of Campi Flegrei's ring fault has electrified the geoscience community, it has also sparked vigorous debate. What does a crisp circular fracture really mean? Some researchers argue that the ring fault's alignment with uplift and microquakes signifies a system primed for failure. The AI-enhanced catalog shows that 3/4 of recent earthquakes went undetected by traditional methods, suggesting that stress has been migrating along specific pathways unseen until now. Proponents of this view contend that the ring fault could act as a weak seam concentrating stress until a section ruptures. Because the ring encircles the area rising fastest, they warn that continued bradyseism might load the fault like a loaded spring. In their scenario, a sudden slip could unleash a magnitude 5 quake, which might then cascade into landslides, local tsunamis, or even trigger deeper failures. Others urge caution. They note that Campi Flegrei has cycled through uplift and subsidence for centuries without erupting. There is no evidence of magma moving upward. The current unrest is driven by shallow fluids and may simply reflect the caldera adjusting to pressure changes. Not every tremor is a foreshock. Comparing the situation to Alaska or Tohoku can be misleading. Those events occurred at subduction zones where tectonic plates routinely lock and then slip catastrophically. Campi Flegrei's ring fault might be more akin to a hinge than a fault plane accommodating uplift through creep rather than sudden rupture. In this view, a moderate earthquake is possible but not necessarily imminent or doom-laden. The debate intensified when a study published in the journal Solid Earth proposed a new conceptual model for Campi Flegrei's magmatic hydrothermal system. The study suggested that changes over the past 40 years could presage more substantial activity. In response, Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology (INGV) issued a rare public statement. The institute emphasized that none of its researchers participated in the study, and that the interpretations represent only the author's point of view. INGV underscored that it bases hazard assessments on validated data and widely shared analyses. In other words, the agency is signaling that while innovative models are welcome, they must be tested against the broader body of evidence before influencing public policy. This highlights a central tension in volcanic science: how to balance openness to new ideas with the need for consensus on issues that affect public safety. The role of artificial intelligence is another point of contention. The machine learning system that mapped the ring fault identified tens of thousands of tiny earthquakes, providing unprecedented resolution. However, some seismologists worry about over-reliance on black box algorithms. AI models can amplify biases if training data are incomplete or if noise is misinterpreted as signal. Traditional phase picking, while less sensitive, has been refined over decades and offers transparency. Advocates of the AI approach counter that the model is not replacing human judgment, but augmenting it. By detecting small events, AI can reveal structures that help scientists ask better questions and design more targeted studies. Both sides agree that cross-validation with other datasets, GPS, INSAR geochemical measurements, is essential to confirm AI-generated patterns. There is also debate about what kinds of hazards to prioritize. Some researchers focus on the risk of a future eruption, noting that Campi Flegrei has produced Europe's largest eruptions in the past 40,000 years. They argue that ring faults sometimes act as pathways for magma. Others emphasize seismic and hydrothermal hazards, pointing out that bradyseism-driven uplift can fracture gas pipes and weaken buildings long before any eruption. This divergence echoes broader discussions in volcanic hazard assessment. Should authorities prepare primarily for eruptions, or for smaller but more frequent crises like earthquakes, ash falls, and ground deformation? The public's perception adds another layer. Residents of Pozzuoli and the broader Naples area have lived with periodic evacuations and media hype. Some are desensitized and may ignore warnings. Others are anxious and feel alert fatigue after years of unrest. Misinformation spreads quickly on social media, with some posts claiming imminent eruptions based on single tremors, while others downplay risks entirely. Scientists and civil protection agencies must navigate these waters, carefully communicating uncertainty without causing panic. INGV's emphasis on transparency and validated data is meant to build trust, but conflicting studies and sensational headlines can undermine that effort. Finally, there is the wild card of external triggers. Recent years have seen speculation about whether heavy rainfall, atmospheric pressure changes, or even large storms can influence earthquake timing. Some studies suggest that typhoons may load faults, adding subtle stresses that, combined with existing tectonic forces, tip them over the edge. At Campi Flegrei, intense rains could seep into fractures and raise pore pressure, potentially lubricating faults. Yet the magnitude of such effects remains debated, and no consensus exists on their significance compared with intrinsic caldera dynamics. The science is still evolving, and responsible communication must reflect that uncertainty. Is the ring fault a ticking time bomb or a release valve? Does AI offer a revolutionary window into subsurface processes or merely add complexity to an already noisy signal? Should hazard plans prioritize eruptions that may not happen in our lifetimes or the very real earthquakes that are happening now? These are not just academic questions. They determine where resources are spent, how buildings are reinforced, and when people are asked to leave their homes. In the face of uncertainty, the consensus among most experts is clear. Invest in multidisciplinary monitoring, maintain transparent public communication, and adopt flexible emergency plans. Whether Campi Flegrei's current unrest culminates in a major event or quiets down as before, the lessons learned here will inform the management of restless volcanoes worldwide. The unsettling truth at Campi Flegrei is that no one can say with certainty what will happen next. More than 360,000 people live inside the caldera, and 1.5 million in the surrounding area. The ground beneath them is rising 15 millimeters every month, and a ring-shaped fault encircles that uplift extending offshore. Two long faults converge under Pozzuoli. These are not speculative rumors. They are measurable realities. History shows that calderas can sit quietly for centuries before releasing sudden, devastating energy. Modern AI can reveal hidden patterns and stress concentrations, but it cannot yet forecast the exact moment when a fault will slip or a magma chamber will surge. In this context, the question is not if Campi Flegrei will produce another significant event, but when and how prepared we will be when it does. The caldera's current unrest could end with a whimper as it has before, or it could culminate in an earthquake that knocks down buildings and triggers local tsunamis. There is no sign of magma rising now, but pressurized fluids are stirring, and the ring fault alignment suggests future bursts of shaking may circle the uplifted zone. Even a moderate earthquake could set off a cascade of failures like those witnessed in Alaska and Japan. These are the stakes. The path forward is clear. Heed the warning signs and invest in preparedness. Authorities must continue to strengthen buildings, upgrade monitoring networks, and refine evacuation plans. Scientists should cross-validate AI findings with other data and remain transparent about uncertainties. Residents should secure their homes, keep emergency kits ready, and stay informed through official channels. On a broader scale, the story of Campi Flegrei should remind us that many of the world's volcanoes and faults are quietly evolving. Nature often whispers before it shouts, and we ignore those whispers at our peril. Ultimately, the lesson of the ring fault is one of humility and vigilance. Earth's forces are vast and ancient. Our best tools can only glimpse their complexity. But by listening to the data, learning from past disasters, and planning for the worst, we can transform fear into resilience. If we respect the warning signs, invest in science and preparedness, and cultivate a culture of readiness, then when the ground beneath Naples does shake again, it will not catch us by surprise. If you've made it this far, you've just followed an invisible fracture line beneath one of the most dangerous volcanoes in Europe. That ghostly ring under Campi Flegrei isn't just a clever AI picture. It's a live map of where the ground is lifting, cracking, and quietly loading the next earthquakes under a city that has already been evacuated once in living memory. The question now isn't whether the caldera is restless. It's how much time we really have before those millimeters of uplift add up to something we can't take back. If this changed the way you think about sleeping, volcanoes, tell us in the comments. Does Campi Flegrei feel like a distant curiosity or a real threat for Europe? Hit like, share this video with someone who needs to see what lies under Naples, and subscribe so you never miss our next deep dive into Earth's most dangerous fault lines.